The conventional wisdom on Britain is everything was honky-dory. Britain helped us build the bomb during the Manhattan Project, and then after the war, we helped Britain get the bomb, and it was all great. And when you actually look at the history, this is not the case at all. After the war, Britain and the United States were growing closer on basically every issue, except for nuclear cooperation, which really strained the alliance. In fact, there was at one point, the Truman administration had to talk down some Congress members that wanted to withhold aid for Britain over this nuclear cooperation. So it really was a strain on the alliance. And the origins of the post-World War II friction dates to their cooperation during World War II. Well, it's true that Britain scientists did join the Manhattan Project. This was almost entirely due to FDR. Most of his advisors actually opposed bringing Britain on board. He overruled them. He signs a number of agreements with Churchill. The two most important are the Quebec Agreement. That was the one where Britain says it's going to end its national program and come help out on the Manhattan Project. And I think more importantly for our purposes is the Hyde Park Aid Memoir, which is where FDR and Churchill signed an agreement that says the Britain and the U.S. will continue their nuclear cooperation once the war is over. What's interesting about this agreement is FDR tells almost no one about it on the U.S. side. They only find out about it once he passes away and the British bring it up. And in fact, the Americans couldn't even find FDR's copy of the agreement until 1957. So what this means is that after the war ends, Britain thinks Americans are going to continue this nuclear cooperation and help them build the bomb. And the Americans say, no thanks, our agreement ended when the war was over. So here's a number of the issues that the Americans had towards the British nuclear program. I'm not going to go through all of them, and hopefully you can see them, but I do want to focus on two. The one is the vulnerability issue. Once Britain announces in 1947 it's going to build a bomb, the Americans become terrified that nuclear facilities and eventual bombs in the British Isles are going to be either targeted by the Soviet Union or worse yet, they'll be seized by the Soviets in the event of invasion and then used to enhance their arsenal. So they actually go through pretty great lengths to try to get Britain not to build the program, especially on the British Isles. They even offer to help the British with the bomb if they agree to locate all the facilities in Canada, not in the British Isles, and England says no thanks. The other issue is launch control, and this really goes to how you operationalize nuclear arsenals within the context of an alliance. And once again, the tensions over this issue date back to the World War II cooperation, because one clause of the Quebec Agreement was neither side would use nuclear weapons against a third party without the other side's agreement. And once the war is over, the Americans desperately want to annul this clause because they don't want to inhibit the president's freedom of action to use nuclear weapons. So they put pressure on the British, and eventually in 1948, the British agreed to eliminate that clause. The following year, the Berlin blockade happens, and during it, the British allowed the Americans to forward deploy bombers to Britain. It's only after those bombers arrive that they begin to ask questions. They begin to think through the implications of this and ask questions like, what can the Americans use these bombers to attack the Soviet Union without getting the Britain's agreement? Which they would say, sure we can. And to the Americans' credit, we began to anticipate the issues that Britain's nuclear program could have for the alliance before England actually explodes the bomb. One example is there's a July 1949 meeting between the Truman administration and Congress. And in the meeting, one senator wonders if Britain gets the bomb, could it stay neutral in the war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union? A few minutes later, a congressman worries that when Britain gets the bomb, it's actually going to start a war with the Soviet Union. It's going to entangle the United States. So they began thinking through these launch control issues. In the end, in 1962, Britain agrees that its nuclear arsenal will be under NATO command with two important caveats. One, only the British Prime Minister can authorize the use of any of the British nuclear weapons. And two, Britain withholds the right to use these weapons outside of the NATO alliance. So while they're nominally under NATO command for all intents and purposes, they're actually a British nuclear arsenal, or national arsenal. So the reason why I focus on these two issues is because I think they have some lessons for South Korea. With the vulnerability issue, one of the reasons we pulled out our own nuclear weapons from South Korea after the Cold War ended was because they were kind of a pain in the ass to protect, and they were more trouble than they were worth. And so if South Korea builds nuclear weapons, how do you protect those from North Korean first strikes or Chinese first strikes? And I think the launch control issue is even more relevant. I actually think you're already seeing this launch control issues develop in the U.S. ROC alliance, but they've become more intense with nuclear weapons. We've seen President Moon, for instance, in recent months say the U.S. cannot attack North Korea without South Korea's permission. At the same time, South Korea is acquiring the missile command and control and ISR capabilities to implement what it calls its kill chain doctrine. And that envisions South Korea launching preemptive strikes against North Korea's nuclear and missile facilities and also its senior leadership, trying to take out Kim Jong-un and the senior leadership. And of course, if they carried out these attacks, we have 28,000 troops on the peninsula, and we'd be caught up in any of the retaliation that North Korea brought upon South Korea. So the question becomes, what say do we have in launching these attacks? So those are the main lessons for Britain.